Hey there, it's Mike Snow with Remax Real Estate based out of Red Deer and back for another video to discuss this time 5 homebuyer mistakes to avoid and some tips for success for those home buyers that are in their home buying journey. So buying a home is a large investment and it's quite significant and it's exciting and it's overwhelming, right? And so we're going to go through some things that I find working with buyers, some mistakes that they may make, and we're going to discuss some things, maybe how we can kind of steer clear of them, avoid them, and just kind of prepare the home buyer for those next few steps, right? So these aren't in any particular order. These are just sort of the way they kind of came into my mind as we go through. So one of them is going to be skipping the pre-approval, and I see a lot of that this year, especially in 2024 when the market has been very competitive, right? And I'm even starting to see in my market where on listings listing realtors are posting that buyers must accompany a pre-approval letter with the offer. As we see a lot of people getting excited, they go out, they look at the home without having that first step done, but there's interest and homes are moving fast, so they make the offer, they have to get it done quickly, and then they lose their financing condition. Right. So you don't want to dive into your search without having that pre-approval in place. Right. And where pre-approval is a step to that home buying process, I would say it's probably one of the most, if not the most important step of the home buying journey, and making sure that you've got a clear budget and that you can kind of tell a seller that you have your ducks in a row, the T's are crossed, and you're good to go. Right. The pre approval is going to help you understand exactly how much you can afford. It's going to make it easier when you're looking at homes to kind of fit within your budget. It also additionally will help having that pre approval letter to potentially give you an edge when you're in that competitive offer and you're making that offer against other buyers to the seller, to be able to kind of give that with them and show that you're serious and you're ready to go, right? So before you start viewing homes, or even if you've already started viewing homes, what'll be a good idea is to go and talk to your lender. I prefer and recommend a mortgage broker, but even into your bank if you need to. Go in, sit down with them, go through all your finances, and kind of get a roadmap and sort of a price point that you can work within. This is going to help you for two things. One, so that you're not looking at homes that you can't afford. The second side, if you do end up in that multiple offer in this competitive market that we're in, right, and you do have to start kind of bidding the price up, you sort of know your limit. You don't overshoot yourself, which I've seen happen this year, or you can maybe go a little higher than what you thought you could, right? Just to kind of secure that home if it is the home for you, right? Now, tip number two I have is overlooking a thorough inspection, kind of looking at that what could go wrong mindset, right? Now, again, in a competitive market, this has been a hot topic, right? It's price can sometimes be the big factor that gets an offer accepted. Lesser conditions can be a thing, and that's kind of ends up in a scary situation because sometimes people go away from that home inspection, right? Skipping a home inspection could seem like a good idea, especially if you're eager to kind of get into that property, but because you're spending a lot of money and the home can be that large investment, having a second set of eyes or a third set of eyes kind of go through the property and give you, just some extra thoughts and things on there can be a really good idea. Now, I've heard over my time where home inspections, where people are really into them and others look at it and say, I can do better, or my uncle or dad can do better. And maybe that's true. I'm not to argue that aspect of it, but what I can say, right, is that a home inspector brings a good amount of information about a lot of things. And so maybe they're not like an expert in that one thing, right? But their visual eye can kind of go through and point out some potential either concerns or maybe even red flags, things that you can bring in that expert if you need to, whether it's an HVAC person or a roofer or an electrician, to kind of look at things a little more closely and determine whether or not there is an issue, or if maybe things aren't that bad. And I've had that in experience where, I can think back to a case where an inspector brought up a concern in regards to some electrical. We had an electrician come take a look at it. And the electrician said, no, there's no issue here, gave us the information as to why there wasn't an issue here, and then obviously made the buyer feel a lot better about it, right? Now, keeping in mind with home inspections is that they are visual, and sometimes this kind of buyers get this a little confused, right? A home inspector cannot remove drywall, they can't open locked rooms, they can't lift up flooring, things of that nature. And they do have many tools at their disposal to kind of help determines certain things, right? But essentially, they are familiar, though, kind of spotting things that are out of the ordinary, right? Even in a visual aspect that the realtor and yourself just might not have that experience doing. So always schedule a professional inspection. And if possible, if you can, join the inspector at the end of the inspection once they're complete to kind of go through it all, right? It's always better to have them explain it to you in person and show you things in person than just reading it on a report, because sometimes the wording can be either scary or maybe not concerning enough, right? And tip number 3, we're going to look at focusing solely on the purchase price. Buyers that forget about the additional costs that could come up and then maybe just get themselves into a position, right? Down payment's going to be a big factor there, right? That's, is going to be a big cost that you're going to have. But you also want to budget for expenses such as the home inspection and maybe a sewer inspection. You're going to want to look at things like expected maintenance, property tax adjustments, right? Insurance deposits, utility deposits, things of that nature, right? And then even if, repairs that could come up. Now, in most homes, they're used, right? And especially if you're buying a home that is a little bit older, or could be going back a bit further, right? There are going to be repairs. And that's what the inspection's for, to kind of give you an idea of things that, draw your attention to the priority items that maybe you need to do. So kind of planning and making sure that you sort of have your expenses all in order, right? So to kind of plan for this, right? Make sure when you're making the offer, you've kind of worked out those extra costs, right? Understanding the utilities, understanding the repairs, and I say before the offer, and maybe the repair thing might not come up until, after you have an inspection, but that's a good idea to go through and say, okay, can we make this home work for us when you're now deciding to kind of push forward with removing those conditions, okay? The next sort of mistake and thing to kind of avoid and prepare for that I'd look at is not looking at the neighborhood, right? Now, many people get very excited about the home, and that is the big factor. When you're looking at homes, right, you look for that ideal floor plan and layout and bedroom setup. Then it can come down to the little things like flooring and paint colors and stuff like that, right? But keeping in mind, the neighborhood can also be something that is very crucial to your long-term happiness within your home, right? You can always change paint and you can update flooring and you can adjust things in the home a lot easier than you can just pick the house up and move it to a different neighborhood or to a better lot, right? So sometimes those locations can really impact, not only your quality of life there, but the value that you put on the property and the future value of the home as well, right? The neighborhood that fits your lifestyle will enhance your happiness within the home, right? So take a look at and consider, prior to maybe even your search or before you make the offer on the home, the nearby amenities that are there, right? The future development plans, how close is it to school? How close is it to the rink? I know for myself, when we were looking at a home one time, we did that. We looked at a home in a neighborhood that was quite far away from the arenas that we seem to be frequenting quite often. And so that became a deciding factor for us. If we have those early morning games, do we want to be driving all the way across to kind of get there, right? So you start to kind of alter and change things a little bit that way, right? So to kind of plan for this, after you've done your research, you can also spend some time in the area. Go to the local businesses, right? If you know people that live in the area, you can kind of go and chat with them. And sometimes even just kind of go into a playground in the summer and talking with some people and just get an idea for the neighborhood and what they like about it to make sure that's going to fit with your lifestyle. The last thing I want to talk about, and this is kind of really big into the competitive market that we've been in this year, is going to be making a weak offer or rushing an offer, right? Missing out on that negotiating opportunity. So in this year's competitive market, what potentially could be next spring as well, it's easy to get caught up in the excitement and then just rush an offer, right? But you can also potentially make an offer that's too low, or one, if you are competing, maybe doesn't have the conditions that you need in there. Now, so you want to discuss with your realtor and take their advice. This is what they do, right? And especially if you end up in that competing situation, listen carefully and just make sure that you've covered all the bases that could make your offer as strong as possible. That being said, though, make sure you're not putting yourself in a situation where, as we discussed in regards to those inspections and that you're maybe taking those conditions out if it's an older home and you really need it, right? So work closely with your realtor, craft an offer that reflects the market conditions, all right, looks at your budget, and obviously is going to be something that, the seller can work with. It's always maybe a good feeling to sometimes kind of go low and see if you can negotiate, but find that number that basically says we want to negotiate, but the seller says, okay, we can work with this and we can kind of negotiate back and forth. It doesn't kind of put their back up against a wall, right? So I'm hoping that these tips and sort of discussing some of these mistakes will help any future buyers in your home buying journey kind of get you on the right track and make it a little bit easier for you, right? The home buying process, for the most part, can be overwhelming. And there can be a lot of excitement and fun, especially looking at the houses. But there's these other little things that kind of come in. There can be a lot of information, right? So by looking at these items and making sure that you've kind of gone through some of these mistakes, getting pre-approved, making sure you have a proper inspection, budgeting and making sure you look at those extra costs, doing your neighborhood research, and kind of looking at the fine-tuning of the offer, you should have no problems having a successful purchase. So I hope these helped. If you have any more specific questions specific to these, feel free to put them in the comments or send me a message directly. I'd be happy to kind of answer where I can and see if I can provide you with more information. Thanks for watching.